everybody, and welcome back to Eggs, the podcast. Today's special guest is Eggs alumni, Ryan Carson. Ryan, how are you, man?
Good to be back. Can't wait for the show.
Yeah, thrilled to have
you.
you.
We've only done this a few times. We've only had guest on twice. Repeats. I think this may be the second or third time. So
holy cow.
That's a big
I feel
win.
honored.
Yeah, well,
honored or scared.
Well, it'll be a lot of fun to catch up, because what's interesting about you, so the first time you were on our show was episode number 52. We are now at like 353, so you're almost exactly 200 episodes apart, which is kind of interesting. And you were our 1 year anniversary show when we first kicked off. So there's a lot of little milestones in the Ryan Carson universe with us. So
happy to provide as much value and entertainment as I can.
Yeah, I love it. Mostly entertainment. We're not looking for that much value. We're trying to have fun around here.
Love it.
I'm just joking. No, but there's obviously, I mean, the world has evolved and changed a lot since we spoke. We spoke in 2018. So, I mean, we've had COVID, we've had, wars and politics and blah, blah, blah. And we've had all these things go on in life since then. And then just if we go back and look at, even your work, I mean, when we met or when we talked last, we had gained awareness of you through Team Treehouse, which was a company that you used to run. Yep. And since then, I believe there's been an acquisition and all kinds of things. So maybe where we ought to start today, for people who weren't listening to us 200 episodes ago, is maybe just a little bit of background about who you are and where you come from, and then we'll just get into it.
You bet. So born and raised in Colorado, fell in love with computers because my dad brought home an Apple IIe in 1987, and then thought, okay, I'm going to study computer science. Went that route, was a web developer. I moved to England on a whim because I love the movie Notting Hill. Best movie ever. And thought I was just going to be there for a year. Met an amazing girl who I'm about to celebrate my 20th anniversary next month. And then started companies. So just wanted to build products. So built a simple product to send large files first. And that was acquired. Then built a second business to train people how to code in person. And that was so much fun. Did events around the world and met amazing people. Then that business was acquired, and then launched our third business, Treehouse, to teach people online how to code. Did that for 10 years. Just was honored to run that business. We were able to touch 1 million people's lives and teach them how to code. And then that was acquired in 21. Meantime, Jill and I moved the kids to, we're in Connecticut now. It was like post-COVID, let's move somewhere small and cute. And then took a couple years off, and then I just joined Intel to help them build a global AI developer community. So it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. I actually, the way we met is through Treehouse, because I was one of the students. I was one of the million people that
makes me so happy.
And so I went from there, and then I went through a boot camp, and I still don't have a job. So yay.
I'll tell you, development has changed so much too. I mean, it's with the advent of AI too, it's all up in the air now.
Yeah. It's kind of scary actually for someone who, like me, who spent the last 3-4 years trying to get into tech. And now, what is it, Devin?
Devin is Devin.
Yeah, it's kind of sketchy for us. So, do you have any insight on that? Actually, kind of. I guess we'll just
I do.
Right in the deep end, right off the get go.
Let's go. I mean, so the meta question is: should people learn to code anymore? So here's how I went through that. So obviously, launch Treehouse because I believed and still believe, like, learning how to code unlocks doors and wealth, right, for people. So now, since Treehouse was acquired, I mean, ChatGPT wasn't launched in 21. Large language models and generative pre-trained transformers, weren't well known. And so since Treehouse was acquired, I actually retaught myself how to code. And because I hadn't shipped production code since like 2007. Right. Because I had hired amazing engineers. So I thought, I want to go in and build, from scratch something and ship it. And ironically, I learned through ChatGPT Plus. I basically went and I said, I used to code. I was like, help me, and taught myself and spent a couple months doing that. And then learned TypeScript so I could ship a Next.js app, and then deployed it on Vercel. And I realized, whoa, like everything's changed now, because what I figured out is, like, instead of, going to a treehouse or a Udemy or anything, now you have a personal tutor. Now, what does that mean though? Like, does it make sense to learn how to code if essentially you're going to have AI agent developers now? And here's the way I look at it. I think it's like being a carpenter and saying, okay, there is now power tools, right? So we used to have saws, and now we have sawzalls. And what does that mean for me? And I think if we play this right, it means that you level up, and instead of becoming an entry-level developer, I think what you do is you launch a company. I think you just go around the process, right? And you ship your first company versus your first, project. So Mike, I'd say the thing to do now, which is both wonderful and terrible, is instead of, trying to get a job, you ship a company. So you spin up an LLC, you solve a problem that you think exists in the world, and you see if you can get one customer and then 10 customers, and then build a small business. And even if that business doesn't work, then you have a much better chance at getting a job as a developer, because you can say, actually, I own a company, I'm a founder, but I really am passionate about your company, and I think I can help, instead of like, hey, I'm a junior dev that's never worked before.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It's funny. Like, I've taken some time off on coding just because of necessity. I've had to do other things.
Been busy.
And I haven't messed around with Devin. I did mess around with GPT at the time. And GitHub's Copilot was really cool. Like, it was super handy to be able to just, I need to do this API call and start typing it. And hey, do you want to do this? Tab? Sure. There it goes. It works. It's pretty significant.
On that vein, I want to give everybody a tip, right? Because, I imagine all of your listeners are not developers. They're probably interested in, like, I want to do more technical things. I want to build things, but it feels so inaccessible still, right? So here's what everybody should do. Go to cursor.sh, and I'm not being paid to say this, I have no financial interest, and download this IDE. It's basically VS Code. It's free, and download it. And then what you do is spin it up, and there's a window on the right that is essentially an LLM, right? And what you say to it, instead of going to ChatGPT or ChatGPT Plus and say, help me learn how to code, and then trying to copy and paste code back and forth, and it's all very disconnected, you just do it in this right-hand pane, and you say, hey, I'm a total newbie. I don't really understand how to do any of this code stuff. Teach me to write a very simple Python script on the subject that I'm interested in. Say it's sailing. And then it starts talking to you, and then it knows about the code you're writing, and it can answer questions about the code you're writing, and it can solve problems with the code and fix bugs. So it's integrated. And this is a whole new experience. Like, I think you learn how to code now inside an environment like this. And I would encourage everybody, just be honest with the chatbot about how much you know. Because if you keep saying, I don't understand, explain it more simply, you will learn.
Yeah.
And you will ship an app eventually.
That's kind of what I was doing with ChatGPT back in the day. Is I would take a snippet of my code, and then I would be like, I'm getting this error. Why am I getting this error? And then paste the code. And then it was a lot of back and forth of trial and error with it. And eventually you'd get something that worked. But this actually sounds pretty cool where it's integrated into it. It'd be interesting.
It's all one thing.
I think that's kind of what Devin's supposed to be as well.
Yeah, and Devin's going to be amazing. So everyone, listening that doesn't know what we're talking about, Devin is an AI software developer, and essentially has 4 windows. It's got a browser, it's got a terminal, it's got a console, and it's got a chat window. And you basically ask it to build something, and it goes away and starts to work on it. What feels more like a human. Now, I think this is going to level everybody up, right? Because number one, you can watch it code. So it's like you're learning from this thing that's coding in front of you, asking it questions, and it's also building something for you. So It's going to be it's going to be a fun, but it will be a slightly scary time if you're a software engineer.
Well, and I think, to your point, and I think it's a good one, like in the olden days, just to use the treehouse metaphor, I mean, because I too was a treehouse customer, but what's interesting is that I wasn't learning web development outside of just like a little bit, but you had a small course on graphic design and running a graphic design business. And so for me, because I come from the design side, I was looking for a way to increase my freelancing, the amount of money I could draw or maybe find work or whatever. And so I started taking treehouse courses for that purpose.
Yes.
And so in those days, you had to stop and read and watch a video and take a quiz. And this is how we started to impart knowledge. And I think that what's happening is that there's sort of this thing going on in society right now where there's a version of AI and ChatGPT and things like that, where people think that basically I don't need to commit anything to my brain anymore. I can just ask this thing, or I can use this thing. And I think that's part of where the fear comes from, is that people are like, oh, well, this is replacing thought. Like, we don't need to do the work anymore.
Which I fundamentally disagree with.
Yeah. And I think the way that you're using it, and I have a little bit of experience in using it the way you've described, which is sort of this iterative, personal tutor kind of model, I think is truly the power of those large language models. I have a 17-year-old son. He's doing math that is way beyond anything I ever had to do. And I wasn't that good at it to begin with. And so what we've been doing recently is I can take a picture of his problem using the app. I can use their annotation tool to do a circle around the problem I want it to look at. Yep. We can transcode that into a text prompt and put our thing in there. And then I can say, okay, well, teach me how to do this step by step. And it'll start to break it down.
Right. And isn't that mind-blowing?
And then instead of just getting the answer from ChatGPT, I can actually learn how to do the math problem. And I found for my son, this has been wildly helpful.
Yes.
And so, and like the other day, in fact, I was trying to learn logarithms because, it's just math I never had to do.
It's been a minute.
And I couldn't even. And so, but to your point about, be honest with the AI and let them know what you know. I told him, I was like, hey man, hey, Mr. GPT, I don't know anything about this. I've never had to learn this. I don't know how you do it. Could you explain it to me like I'm a kindergartner?
Yes.
And it put together this whole story about magical bunnies that are worth a certain amount of money. And every time the bunnies meet, there's more bunnies. And it created this whole fiction about
the power.
That. And it told it in a way that, to be honest, I still didn't really get, but I think it's more me at it.
But you're much closer to actually understanding. So what you unlocked, and what I think people eventually realize, is you're going to actually know more about everything, not less. Yeah. Because and this happens to me all the time. Like, I'll hear some complex financial topic as I'm listening to the news, and I'll just say, what does that mean? I have no understanding. And then I walk through it, and then I actually am better informed and smarter than I was before. Versus before trying to Google it or knowing it's going to take me half an hour to figure this out. I'm just not going to bother. So I think we're all being leveled up, right?
Yeah.
We all have essentially a being that has an IQ of about 100 that is so excited to help you be better. It wants to answer your questions, and as soon as it has level 2 thinking, which means it can think and plan. And then come back, you could say, hey, can you spend a little time and go write a little report for me on this in a language that I can understand, with some images and maybe a couple of videos, and come back to me when you're ready. You'll have your own personal research assistant, and imagine what you can do with that. If you look at it as like, this is a tool that unlocks knowledge for humans on demand. It's just a total game changer.
Well, and that's the thing, is I'm hoping that these aren't famous last words, but I think that if we look at AI more as a tool, or if that's our mindset versus AI as being Skynet, for example, I think as long as we have a healthy approach to it, then it can be healthy, and to use your example of the carpenter, it's exactly that, right? Like, it's the going from
better tool,
AM, FM to 8-track, and then to vinyl, and then to, or whatever order things went in. There's always these shifts in technology. Yeah. Where people, are like, I'm good with my 8-track. I don't really want to get onto this, CD boat.
Right. And you're just, the wave is coming. Right. And so we should learn how to ride it. And I think if you jump on a surfboard and you try to start paddling and ride the wave, I think your life will be orders of magnitude better. And this is why I joined Intel. I'm like, there are going to be a few companies that are literally creating intelligence in the future. And I want to be in the middle of that. I want to understand what's happening, because we're seeing this happen live, right? We have cloud, right? You have, things like, well, I can use an AI in the cloud. For instance, OpenAI is a good example. All of your listeners, if you haven't tried Anthropic's new model, it's called Claude 3. It's amazing. So you have this like intense competition in the cloud to build smart AI, right? And that's going to drive the progress faster and faster. Then you have these amazing open source models that Meta is releasing, for instance, Llama 2. And then you have a ton of other open source models. So you can go to Hugging Face and literally download these models to your computer. So then you have what we call the edge, right? You can run AI on the edge, right? Whether it's your laptop or your phone, offline. So a lot of people probably don't know this, but you can actually run a large language model like ChatGPT on your computer privately without an internet connection.
That's crazy.
It's wild. What a wild time to be live.
Pulling from? How would that work? Are you like downloading Google and saving it on your computer?
So it's such a good.
Yeah, that's
such
the
a
only
good question.
downside. You need 20 terabytes of data storage, but other than that, it's no big deal.
It's not. No, actually, it's not that bad, right? So I'll do a quick like primer on like what is a large language model, and then how could you run it locally, like without the internet? I don't get it. So essentially, what happens, you have these large companies like Meta who have server farms of very fast computers. And what they did is they grab all this data off the internet that is freely accessible and hopefully licensable and high quality. And then they feed it into what's called a neural network, right? And the neural network is kind of like a human. You basically put stuff in and stuff comes out, and then it goes, that's not right. And then it learns a little bit, does it again. That's not quite right, but it's a little better. Learns again. That's a little better. And then eventually it understands what it's being put in. That's called, this is called learning, essentially. And then all that's actually happening, what's wild is you're talking, Ryan, about, I think, logarithms or it turns out there's some math I should have paid better attention to in high school because intelligence turns out to be basically matrix multiplication and some calculus. It basically has a set of numbers, right? It says when I see the word cat, I have some numbers stored and they're called neurons, and out comes a picture of a cat. Those are called weights. So they're basically a huge number of numbers, right? And so it turns out that what that model has learned is encapsulated in a bunch of numbers that is a file, right? So it's almost like you're downloading its knowledge, right? And so it turns out you don't use the internet when you ask a neural network like a large language model something. It actually is just a bunch of numbers that it's pulling to give you an output, so you can download it. So if you want to talk to a large language model like Llama, which is an open source, you can download it, and it's a file. It's about between sort of 5 and 15 gigs. Then you can run it on your local machine. So it's really accessible, and I encourage people just to try it.
That's crazy.
Well, and I think that might be one of the applications for AI in the future, right? I mean, we've seen, in fact, we had a guest on this show, the founders behind a company called Personal AI.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea was that they could basically create an AI that could basically, impersonate you isn't the right thing, but basically
right.
it could
multiply you,
receive questions and respond in a way that was, in line with maybe how you would respond to something based on your content, based on your writing, based on your videos, based on whatever, right? You can feed it all this stuff and it kind of learns to build a persona around you.
Yep.
But I think that's sort of, maybe the future of these Alexa type items, right? Is you've got sort of this thing that caters to you because it knows you and it is you and it, understands the things you're interested in. And maybe that's how these local models become effective or useful.
I think so.
You use it to help you do your work or something because it knows what you do for work, and you guys can work together and collaborate, right? It's our robot
exactly.
Overlord.
And there's a lot of data you might not want in the cloud, right? About your life, your schedule or your kids' birthdays. There's all this kind of personal information. You're like, well, I don't know if I want OpenAI to know all this stuff about me. The beautiful thing about having a local model on the edge, like on your laptop, is it's completely private. what you're telling that large language model isn't being sent to the internet, isn't being stored in the cloud. And so I think we're going to have this model develop this paradigm develop where people say, I feel more comfortable with AI on the edge, actually, on my device. It knows everything about me. I'm not really comfortable about a company knowing all these things about me. But then you have compute in the cloud, and you have huge challenges at work that you want to solve, and of course your data is already in the cloud, and it makes much more sense to use a cloud provider for that. We'll see how it works out.
Well, and I think that, obviously one of the big concerns around AI and all this is data privacy and who owns what and what's it learning based on. And, I know in my community, in the design and art community, obviously there are a lot of people complaining that their, style has been jacked and DALL-E's now cranking out things that look like their work and, all these kinds of things. Right. And so there's certainly some impact on our privacy when things are being just sort of scoured, writ large. And so that idea of having it local on your own machine and being able to sort of silo off some of that may be sort of how we deal with sort of privacy concerns in the future, what goes up and what doesn't.
I think so. And it's pretty interesting because Apple really pushed hard on being the private phone for a long time, right? The feeling of, your data really is going to be secure here. But they seem to be behind on AI. Right. Well, so we just heard this.
Yeah. Ryan and I were just talking about that. They're pairing with Google. Is that what
Google, right? For Gem, apparently. Yeah. Right. So it's like, gosh, that's interesting. So, they're potentially teaming up on the next iPhone to deliver, a large language model on the phone that is private. And I can see that being pretty interesting. Right. I don't know where that's going to go. Apple has been pretty behind so far. In AI in general, or they're at least not telling us what's going on. So,
first the Apple Car, now this.
Right. Yeah, I'm so disappointed.
It's interesting, and I have a bias. I always blame Tim Cook for these kinds of problems. So maybe it's an anti-Microsoft.
Come on, be nice to Tim.
I think he's an incredible business guy, but I think what you need is a visionary guy, like a Steve Jobs guy, to carry this kind of stuff forward. And so, but I can't argue for Tim's success. So, let's go Tim. But, the Google integration is an odd one.
Come on, Tim.
So you, after you left Treehouse, I think you took some time off, but then you started a company called Maple. What was Maple? Or is it still a thing?
So Maple was really an experiment for me to from, beginning to end, ship an AI app.
Okay.
And so that's what I wanted to do is like, can I do this myself? Right. Like, because as I said, I started off as a dev, but then as I grew companies, I hired designers and developers and infrastructure, software engineers and marketers and all this stuff. And I was like, I wonder if one person can ship a company. And so that was kind of the goal. And I wanted to understand every part of it. Right. And so I decided, okay, I know a lot about education. And so I want to build an app that will teach people something. I found learning sales really hard. I didn't like it. And so why don't I build an AI sales coach and then just kind of see how it all works. And I also want to deploy it live, and I want to take real people's money and build payment processing, and I want to do marketing and so did all of that, soup to nuts, and it was such a good learning experience. And so Maple still exists and great, and we have some customers, but it was really just, can I do this 100% by myself? And it was a fun project.
Was that
maybe can we talk a little bit further about that too, and talk about the development of a AI-based company and how that varies from something that's sort of a traditional technology-based company, like a SaaS company or something?
You bet. So essentially what I want to do is figure out, okay, I want to build I want to build something that will solve a problem. That's always the beginning of a business, right? So pick a problem that you want to solve. I felt that learning sales was hard. Maybe I could make that better. And then the big unlock was, at Treehouse, it was very hard and expensive to give people personalized feedback, right? You'd have to do with humans. And so, students would submit their code and we'd have to have a real human review it and give them feedback. And it was it would, and my team was amazing. They worked hard, but you only have so many hours in the day. And so what I realized is, wow, if I can have an AI give constant feedback to the students, that would be amazing. But how does that work? Right. And so for anyone who's not a programmer, you have something called an API, which is basically you have a big tech company and they have something that they do. And then you write some code and you can use their service in your app. And so I basically went to OpenAI, created an account, and signed up for an API key. And I wrote some Python and some TypeScript, which basically says, when the student types this in, send this to the OpenAI server, get an answer, and come back. And so essentially we built, a tutor using these APIs from OpenAI. And then I shipped the whole thing up to Vercel. So Vercel is this amazing infrastructure company where you literally commit to your repo and it deploys a live site.
It's got the CI/CD built into it, which is just amazing.
And I'm not being paid by them either. Like, I just think Vercel is an amazing developer experience. But the point of all this is just, y'all, if you're listening to this and you haven't done any stuff, just ask, something like ChatGPT or Claude 3 to teach you. And in a couple months, you can build almost anything.
So Python and TypeScript don't really go together.
I learned
kind of like
that.
an interesting combo there. How is Python kind of a requirement for ChatGPT for the connection, or
no? So this is the funny story. I had learned Python. I felt more comfortable in it, and so at first I wrote Python on the back end, and I was using basically jQuery on the front end.
Sure.
And I was like, oh my goodness, this is hard. Like, surely there's a better way. And I came across Next.js. I was like, oh, Next.js is a full stack environment. Oh man, but I have to learn JavaScript. And so I was like, in fact, I probably need to learn TypeScript. So I just went through the pain of learning TypeScript, and now the front and back end are all TypeScript. And I actually don't have any Python anymore. But I will say, if you want to go into AI, learning Python is a great way to go, because the majority of the AI world is Python.
Yeah, I went down the Django rabbit hole and Python, and I was going to use that as my back end, and then I wanted to use Tailwind CSS as my layout and everything, and then I tried to incorporate Tailwind into Django. It didn't work. Then I went down hey, what's this Next.js thing?
Yep.
And I learned Next.js, and then I learned TypeScript, and so I went down to
same journey. same, and you realize, it's just easier if I learn TypeScript, and the Vercel makes it so easy to ship. Yeah. It's just, I was like, I can't believe how easy this is now.
I built my portfolio in Next.js, and
nice.
I was over a weekend. I went to, I wanted to show it to some people, and how am I going to get this up to how am I going to deploy it? And I literally watched one YouTube video, did two things, and it's all of a sudden live, and they give you a link. And
you're like, what?
It's incredible. So check out.
It is incredible. Yeah. And it's cool you mentioned Tailwind as well. Tailwind blows my mind. So when I was doing, CSS and HTML, I just found the whole thing really hard. And Ryan, I don't know if as a designer, if you were a front end developer, did you do any of that?
Well, to the extent that I hire a lot of front end developers, and so I had to code because I'm old enough to code. If you wanted to be on the internet, there was a time you had to know.
Yep. Okay.
And so I'm about that good, but it gives me the power to talk to designers and developers, but it doesn't give me the power to do it all myself.
So I have an assignment for you, Ryan. It's a little bit of homework. So this weekend, I would like you to talk to your favorite LLM and say, teach me Tailwind. Because as Mike is saying, like, it's a game changer. Like, it's so wild. Like, so all it is basically inline styling. But it is so powerful. You're like, I want this to be 2 pixels over here, and it's okay. It is. And then it's just, I love Tailwind.
It's like
changed my life.
Bootstrap on steroids. It's just next level. So
you have a bunch of purists who are like, I can't believe, we're putting, markup, here, but you're just like, I don't care anymore. It's too easy.
Well, so it's funny. I mean, in the years since we've spoken, and actually just in the last couple of years, I've started working with this tech startup. And I have been, I basically came in as a guy who was just designing UI. Yep. And, but that has sort of evolved into a product role. And so now I'm running a team, managing a team of developers and all that stuff. So I'm doing a ton of learning right now, drinking from the fire hose. So, so some of this will be great, but a lot of our new technology that we're trying to build is going to be based on large language models and a lot of interplay between data sets. And so I wonder if you'd talk about, and, a little bit is selfish for me, but also maybe just, back to the discussion about Maple or other products and services you've been involved with, and maybe even as it applies a little bit to your new role in building a community over at Intel. But as a founder, and as a guy who ships product, like, I think there's a lot that goes into like product thinking. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just sort of, the thinking behind a product, because like, I know I'm notorious for starting a business, quote unquote, on a whim because I had an idea that I thought was fun.
Yep.
But like, I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of, vetting products, making sure that, there actually is some product market fit before you commit big hours behind it, even though maybe now we can just ask Devin to spin up an app.
Devin's good. Absolutely. So I always encourage people to, instead of saying, I'm going to start a company or start a product, is let it become clear you need to do that. And here's what I mean by that. You'll start experiencing problems or pain points. And then if you let that be a tap on your shoulder that, oh, there might be a business here, that's like always where to start. Because the first thing I'll say is never start a vitamin business, always start a pain pill business, right? And I know we've all heard that, but pain pill businesses, and I don't mean actually pain pills, solving.
I hear it's very lucrative, though.
I've heard that as well. I don't want to go into that business. But as soon as you experience pain in your life, then there might be a business opportunity, right? And so that's the first thing you pay attention to. And then you start to think, well, how would I want that pain solved, right? And then you think about, well, okay, what do I need to build to solve it? And maybe it's not even a tech company, maybe it's a shop, or maybe it's a service, or, but say it is a tech company, then you might be able to say, okay, would it help us if we had a intelligent being that was always able to do something, whether it's for the business or the customer, right? And then that's where you go, okay, AI, right? And then you start to put the pieces together. But I always encourage people to start with the UI. Like, start with the thing humans are actually going to interact with, right? Sketch it out and think about, I'd want to click this button and I want this to happen. And then because, and I learned everything from Jason Fried, and DHH at 37 Signals, like this obsession with the customer. And so I always start there, and then you sketch a little bit on a piece of paper and think about how you want it to work. And then you start to build from there. And now, and again, I promise I'm not being paid by Vercel to say all these things, but
I was going to say, maybe they need to sponsor the show, though. Come on, guys.
Vercel, if you're listening, please sponsor the show. But so V0 launched, and any of the listeners who haven't heard this, it's so fun to use. So I think it's v0.dev. You go there and you say, create an interface where the customers, enter in their ideas, and then out comes, product recommendations. And then it actually builds the UI. And it not only designs it, but it builds it, of course, all in Next.js. And so you can prototype super fast, right? So you have a basically almost working front end code. And then they make it easy to wire up the back end pretty fast. And then they make it easy to connect into OpenAI's API. So you can get a pretty clunky, MVP shipped pretty fast, and then hook it up to Stripe. I mean, I feel like such an old man sometimes. I'm like, when back in the day, we had to build payment processing and recurring trans, but Stripe just does everything. I can't even, like, Stripe blows my mind. Like, you hook it up, take some payments, and then start asking people to pay for it, right? And then if somebody pays you for it, then maybe I've got something here. So that's the way I think about product, about launching something. The last thing I'll say is we have truly entered a new era. it is absolutely possible to start a company yourself now. Like, I'm not a designer. I appreciate design. Um, but these things are all you can augment yourself with AI. So if you are a designer, you can code. If you're a developer, you can get decent design. Like, if you don't know anything about finance, AI does that too. We're in a world where you can absolutely ship a company by yourself. And you can do it on the side. And then if it starts to work, then eventually you quit your day job and run the company.
Yeah, it's incredible the ease of entry compared to even 4 years ago when I first started. Like,
It's
actually,
mind-blowing.
it was funny to hear you kind of like, oh, you go to this website and it builds it for you, and then you can kind of combine it with that. I didn't even do the SketchUp. I jumped right into HTML trying to learn how to build the front end.
Love
And
it.
like, oh, I got the toolbar, I got all these feature sets I want, and then I'm trying
Yep.
to design all the front end with no back end tied to it, only to find out that there's a lot more to it than just
There's
doing
a little
it.
bit.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny to that point too. So, now being involved with this tech startup, one of the things we're working on right now is writing an API. And I have never written an API before. So this is new to me. I understand logically how these things work. I've designed UIs for these things before. So I understand, like, at least, I need to be able to put in input, get back out output, and all that stuff. But to your point, I was actually relieved to hear you say that it's not a bad idea to start out with a sketch or a concept of your UI, or of what the software is supposed to do anyway,
The
because we've been
workflow
doing it the
and
other way around, which is writing the API and then trying to envision all the different endpoints that we need and the different things. And
Yeah, it's
I found
backwards.
that to be really challenging for me. But the guys that I'm involved with in this company are very tech forward. They're, brilliant engineers and stuff like that. So for them, they're just like, no. We'll just document the API. We'll just write this headless API that doesn't need to be tied to anything. We'll just do all the stuff in the database for now.
Yep.
But me as a visual thinker and a visual guy, like, my whole thing is like, well, why aren't we designing the software? Like, let's just design the software and then you
Right.
guys can figure out how to make it work. Like, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
And my whole career has been designing stuff and handing it off to experts to finish.
But,
you know what I mean?
Ryan,
So,
I think you can have a massive impact on the developer experience, right? Or DX. And I actually think that's very important, right? So you can be imagining, well, yeah, they're going to design the API, but how do you design the experience? So when you land on that page as a developer, it's so easy to get started, and it's not just throwing the docs up, right? I think what I recommend every company that builds tooling for developers does is, number one, really good documentation, like, obviously. And then what I encourage everybody to do is have 3 examples. Like, and so you basically arrive on the site and it's like, are you a newbie developer and you want to use our API? Are you mid-level or are you experienced? Here's 3 paths, because on path 1, we're going to totally hold your hand and show you, here is, basically a recipe that you just kind of deploy and it works. Here's the mid tier and here's the advanced tier. I think that's thing 1 on developer experience. But then thing 2 is, I would encourage everybody to fine tune a model, probably Llama, on your code base, and then create a chatbot that answers everything about your code base. Like, you should not be forcing developers to read through all of your docs.
yeah.
You should have an LLM that tells them everything about your docs, and you can fine tune or use RAG and get that done.
I can't tell you how many times I've gone down the rabbit hole of reading docs and trying to figure stuff out, and the person who wrote the docs
Frustrating.
was way over my head to begin with, and didn't dumb it down enough where I could actually understand it. And so something like that would be very useful for someone who's trying to access just an endpoint and how to, do what you need
Show
to
me
do.
some examples. Like, give me some simple code to understand. I think actually, developer products should be as wildly focused on the user experience or developer experience as traditional apps. There's a big difference between Vercel and some of their competitors because of this. It's a world of difference.
yeah. Well, and I think too that that's going to be part of maybe the future or the evolution of the developer's role, right? Is they, may not be needed so much for the hard coding. Maybe we still need their expertise to make sure that the GPT's output is accurate, or whatever. There's still going to be a role for people who are high level developers.
Yep.
But as that role shifts and evolves, I think that the sort of traditional model, which was sort of a creative side on one side or product side on one side and developer side on the other side of the wall, and we just kind of interface through email or whatever. I think that model is going to have to die. And I think you're going to end up with more product focused engineering talent where people are able to sort of, cross hybrid these roles where before, if they were allowed to just sort of focus on the engineering and make sure that they were elegant in their solution, they could do that. But I think in the future, there will be sort of this, cross-platform stuff where, product managers are going to have to learn more about development and developers are going to have to learn more about product and vice versa and try and meet in the middle to create good products.
Which is a good thing. And this is not just happening to developers, right? If you think about folks in finance, right? So you used to have entry-level accountants, or think about legal, you have interns. Like, everybody is going to have to level up here, right? Mm-hmm. Where everybody has an assistant now that has an IQ of 100, right? And so you used to think you'd walk into a kitchen and work your way up to the head chef. Well, now, everybody has the capability to be a head chef because they have a sous chef next to them now. So you just have to level up your thinking. And that's why I encourage people, try to ship a company first. Like, whatever it is, you'll learn all the pieces and then you can walk into a potential job at a higher level, or the company may just work, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you've built a business and away you go.
Well, and do you think that sort of, oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, speaking of the company working, Treehouse worked for you and you got acquired. And that's a process in and of itself. That's something that most people don't get to experience. Do you have any insight in the acquisition process that you could share with our listeners, and maybe if they ever get to that point where they are getting acquired, pitfalls, things to look forward to, things to pay attention to?
Yeah. The first thing I'd encourage people to do is just build something that solves a problem you care about, and just focus on that. And do everything you can to make that company sustainable and profitable. And mentally have that be the goal, right? There's a lot of pressure on entrepreneurs now to, start companies that scale to billions of dollars, or even hundreds of $1 million, or even tens of millions of dollars. And the truth is, and I'll just, channel Jason Fried again, is that, most businesses are never going to be multi-million-dollar businesses. And that's actually okay. And that's actually normal. And that's a good thing. So if you can start a business that covers your family's costs and solves a real problem, that is a massive win, right? And you'll probably never be acquired. And actually, that's fine. Now, say your business is going well and you're solving a real problem. There's this new magical player in the ecosystem called acquired.com. Now, I'm not being paid by them either. But this is a new market.
I was going to say, do you want to hold up a Coke or a Pepsi or something? Let's go full product placement here.
Yeah, here is a Corsair mouse, right?
Yeah, let me get my logos positioned correctly.
There we go. But acquired.com is awesome. And I wish either it existed and I didn't know about, or I wish I would have paid attention, because essentially this is a marketplace for reasonable sized businesses to be acquired. And, I think acquisitions happen on up there for businesses that are doing multiple millions of dollars of revenue, but most are doing hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. And this is a wonderful way to get acquired, right? It's straightforward. There's a process. There's buyers there. You don't need some fancy VC, experience or some TechCrunch article written about you. So I think that's what I would encourage everyone to think about. And so that could be a really good, amazing outcome for you and your family. It's not going to be newsworthy. It's not going to be a TechCrunch. You're not going to go buy yachts, that kind of thing, but that's a good thing. Because in hindsight, I'll say, Treehouse, as I said, we're honored to serve millions of students, so proud of that. I had a blast doing that. And we were a profitable company. But we raised venture capital, right? And when you raise venture capital, you got to push and swing for the fences. That's the job.
That was going to be
in the end, that put us. it put us in a tough spot, right? We had to grow because, as a founder, I had to deliver to my investors, and it ended up putting us in a tough spot where I had to make tough decisions about downsizing the team. And, we had to do tough things in the end. And so in hindsight, it's like that would have been a wonderful business just to run as a family business that helped millions of people that didn't have to have a huge outcome.
So if you were to go back and the opportunity to take capital was on the table in hindsight 2020, would you have just bootstrapped it and not taken the money and just kind of gone?
100%.
Okay.
100%. And it's not my investor's fault. Like it's no one's fault except for me as CEO founder, right? I own everything good and bad that happens, but it could have been a really powerful business that served millions of people and changed lives. And we could have run it as a smaller business. And so, yeah, I would go back and we bootstrapped it. We just raised money later.
Sure.
So yeah, I would encourage everybody, just ignore all the glitz and all the VC distraction and because none of that isn't, 1 out of 100 businesses participates in that. So why not enjoy being one of the 99 others that just builds a great business that helps people, that pays your family's bills? There's so much power in that.
That's always been kind of my thought process too, is if you can pay your bills, have passive income and enjoy what you're doing, why would you do that? Yeah, exactly. Why put other people and be beholden to them when you can kind of just be your own boss, get the passive income coming and live a great life? That just sounds.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think that's a refreshing perspective too. And maybe it's just, maybe I'm tuning it out nowadays, but it does seem that there's a trend away from sort of the big flashy startup founder that we were experiencing for a little while. There's sort of, this era of startups where it was everyone's chasing the unicorn thing. And I'm sure there's still plenty doing that. But it seems like, at least in terms of sort of, I don't know, general awareness, or at least my awareness of this stuff, it does seem more like people are focused more on, building a good business or whatever. And if it goes well, it goes well, versus doing it for the accolades or for the attention and stuff. And I think that overall that's positive. And I think that'll also, affect the way that VCs enter into different businesses. And I think it'll all become more healthy over time. But there was just sort of this, hot minute there where it was just like, oh, $1 billion valuation and blah, blah, blah. And it's, all this stuff. And it's like, and then if you're not there, it's a fail and your business sucks and you're a horrible founder and all this stuff. And it's like,
right. Which isn't
and it just,
real.
I don't think it helps anybody. Right. And it was just basically all manufactured. So
100%. Yeah. We're in a new world where you can build amazing companies that solve real problems because you're supported by AI. And there's so many good problems to solve. Like it's exciting.
Well, and I think that's maybe leans into that conversation about sort of the democratization of AI and just how access to everybody, right? I mean, just like in the early days of the internet, it was sort of only available to an elite class, or for the early days of, software development, it was really like an elite group of people who understood that technology that were able to capitalize on it. And they did. But, now, we've gotten to the place where the internet is ubiquitous and we all have $1 billion computers in our pockets. And we all have, all these things. And so I think with this democratization, and you're going to see it, it'll probably take some time, just like everything does, but you'll see it across this AI landscape too. And to your point, it's, well, now doing development work for a non-developer is within reach, and pushing a business out yourself based on your own idea without the need for whatever else is within reach. Like all those things are now doable. And I think that just like, I put together this little pamphlet called how to build a business this weekend. And the idea was I spun up an e-commerce store over a weekend. Now this is 15 years ago or whatever, right? So it was like, but how to do the branding and how to create the store and how to do all these things, right? And so, but the only reason that happened, or the only reason it was possible to me, is because of that democratization of technology. Right. I was able to say, okay, well, I can do this and I know how to do this. And this software platform facilitates that.
Yes.
All this stuff. So that just by virtue of access, I was able to take part in the entrepreneurial game. Right.
Yep.
And I think that AI is going to do that same thing, but on steroids.
Exactly. Now it's democratizing access to intelligence, which you can build on. So it's been lovely to be here, y'all. I've got some meetings I've got to attend, so I've got to jump pretty soon. But I just want to say it's so fun to be back on the show, and I'm I appreciate you helping people understand this knowledge, and hopefully today some people listen and grab some tips that they can use to slingshot.
Yep. Well, I know I'm going to be running right off to developing some apps here pretty quick.
There you go.
So I guess then on that note, Ryan, do you just want to take a quick minute, let people know where they can track you down if they want to engage in Intel's new AI community that you'll be running?
You bet.
How they can get involved with any of that, or your business ventures or anywhere else people can catch you.
You bet. So I'm super active on X/Twitter. Just follow me at Ryan Carson. I love to meet folks that listen to the show. So say hello, and I'll follow you back. We're working hard at Intel to support the AI developer community. We're not here to sell you machines or ask you to check out Intel. We just want to support the AI dev community. So if you want to build an AI, you have questions, hit me up and I'll do my best to support you there.
Is there an actual like a Discord channel or someplace people could go for that community?
There is. So, but the URL is not easy to say. But if you, we have something called Intel Dev Hub, and I'm on there all the time. So if you search for that Discord, but hit me up on X, and I'll guide you all to the right places. And thanks for listening.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. We really appreciate you taking the time, and glad to catch you almost exactly 200 episodes into the future. So thanks so much for doing this again. We're thrilled to have you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. We'll see you guys next time.